So, Mike, it's been a couple of weeks since we last spoke because we're doing this now bi-weekly. Ticket to Ride, Mike Polydorus, president of Paper Airplane Media, Paul DeGarabidi, and I am your co-host, senior media analyst for ComScore. It's great to be back. I named, at least tentatively named this episode, The Horror Habit. Get it? Like a nun's habit.
I love that. I love that.
So
a couple of things that have happened since we last met. I did want to bring this up. So I was actually in Dallas 2 weeks ago, right after we recorded for a Cine show. Ran into a couple of regional exhibitors. One of them, one of the more prominent exhibitors in the space. First thing, I sit down and I'm like, we're going to talk about all these different things that we got cooking as far as from a paper airplane standpoint. No, you know what he says to me, Paul? Says, here's the most important question: when's the next episode dropping? He is
I love that, Mike.
And he is the CEO of the COO, I should say, of one of the top regional exhibitors. And his first question is, when is the next episode dropping? So,
well, you can tell them now that it will be soon.
Yeah, I thought that was great. And then
that's great.
But a lot has happened since we last talked. And before we get into the current state of affairs, we should probably bring up what is the biggest news to hit the theatrical box office in quite some time, and that is Taylor Swift is coming to the big screen.
Taylor Swift is coming to town. Yeah, it's very, very exciting, Mike. I think that when that was announced, she scared the devil out of another movie that moved to the 6th.
Very swiftly moved to the 6th.
Oh, here we go. It's going to be nonstop. It's going to be very punny today on Ticket to Ride. But this is huge news. I think, I was talking to our esteemed colleague and great reporter, Sarah Whitten, and we were kind of saying, wait, does this have blockbuster opening weekend numbers written all over it? And I'm like, if you look at those pre-sales, I'm thinking, yeah. I mean, I don't know how many theaters. It's clearly going to be wide.
Well, okay.
But I think this movie is going to inject a lot of box office into this market.
So look, there is a good news, bad news that goes with the whole thing. If you want to take the quote unquote bad news to the whole thing is, in typical Taylor Swift fashion, the news was on lockdown, and it basically hit through an Instagram post at, whatever it was, 6 a.m. Pacific time, that basically said, hey, look,
that's right.
My movie's coming to the big screen on October 13th. Tickets on sale now. And that was it. And, a day later, $50 million worth of tickets had been sold. So that created a ripple effect where, as you mentioned, movies had to start leaving that date. It wasn't good for Exorcist, which had to go to the 6th. Lionsgate Ordinary Angels had to move to a TBD date. They haven't decided where that one's going yet. Caused movies that were on the 6th then to have to move elsewhere. Movies that were on the 20th decided to get out of the way. So it created a big ripple effect that was frustrating, I know, for some of our studio friends, and expensive for some of our studio friends.
Very much so. I mean, if you think about The Exorcist, that was Friday the 13th, man. Like, they probably picked that date, like Friday the 13th. We got that for The Exorcist.
I mean, think about it too. What Universal has been doing with some of their horror titles too is they've been going 17 days to PVOD.
Yeah,
Paul, what's 17 days from the 13th?
Gee, I don't know, that holiday where people dress up. And,
yes, exactly. So it wasn't like they could then move forward. They had to move back, which put them on the 6th, which then meant other movies had to scatter off of the 6th. So ultimately, what it did was it created a giant ripple effect. All of that being said, it's great news for the industry, because you and I have been discussing that with the strikes that have been taking place, and the fact that movies have been moving out of the window of the fall. The latest one, of course, was Dune that moved out. the idea now that you have this movie that is already pre-sold $1 gazillion, which will be in every theater in North America on October 13th. And, while AMC is listed as the distributor, they're making it available to everybody. This is not an AMC exclusive. This is, right. You're going to be looking at 4,000 plus locations that are going to have this. And, when you talk about blockbuster status, I think the answer to that is yes. I think an opening weekend, that is around $100 million is not out of the question.
I hope so, Mike, because I went on the record saying that.
Well, no, and I don't think you're going to have to backtrack. The big question is, and nobody really knows the answer, is how does that end up playing out? Other concert films that we've seen come into the marketplace, whether it was the Miley Cyrus, the Justin Bieber, or the Michael Jackson, had dramatic fall-offs in week 2. In other words, all the fans rushed out, saw
That's
it,
right.
That was it, and the movie had a quick burn. The question on this is, there's a 4-week window that it has been initially announced that it'll be in theaters. Will that week 2, week 3 still have the same kind of gusto point, that we, and again, we're not going to know till we get there. The one thing that's a little different about this than the other concert movies is Taylor Swift is not just a concert. It's a cultural phenomenon. And it is something that, never underestimate, the Swift fans and, the Swifties on what they want to do and what they're going to see.
And maybe like the non-Swifties. I mean, I might go check it out because I want to see what the fuss is all about. I think that a lot of people, the non-initiated, may sit out that first weekend. You'll get $100 million from the Swifties. Then maybe if the movie's really good, for those who require that, not just going out just because it's Taylor Swift, who may not know her music that well, but have heard of her because she's an icon, may come out in the successive weeks. So, and you're right, we don't really know because Taylor Swift is unique. If you look at that Justin Bieber movie, that's $73 million that it ultimately made domestically, $99 million globally. The Michael Jackson, This Is It, opened to $23.2 million, went on to make $72.1 million domestically, Mike, but worldwide for This Is It, $262.
Well, and that one's probably a little more in line with what Taylor might do based on her reach. The difference, though, I would say about the Michael Jackson and the Taylor Swift of it all is, remember, Michael Jackson was this footage that had been put together after his death.
Yep.
That was those rehearsals for what was to be the This Is It tour. This is the case of, this is more back to a traditional concert footage or concert. But again, never underestimate what we think might come out of this. There has been no leak as to what this actually will be, in her, and I know this from my daughter, and, she is a big Swift fan. And throughout the tour, Taylor Swift had surprise songs. Every night there were 2 surprise songs. And when she played the song, it was retired and they didn't play it again. The big question would be then, are they going to incorporate something like that into this release? Are we going to get where week 2 is slightly different from week 1? Week 3 is...
Mike, that would be... You make a great point. That would be like a, sort of in real time modifying what's going to be in the movie. And also, too, I think unique about this is when the Hannah Montana Miley Cyrus concert tour movie came out in 2008, I don't think she was on tour then.
Right.
And I don't think Bieber was either. I could be wrong. But this will be smack dab in the middle of while Taylor Swift is able to be out there on tour promoting the movie.
Well, the one thing is she's now amazing. In a break. She picks up the tour again in October of 24. So she's got about a year to kind of, refresh herself, so to speak, after this grueling tour. But that being said, the idea, and again, this goes back to something we talked about a few months ago, and that is, with the advent of digital cinema, anything is possible. So the content that is available today can be completely different than the content that is available the following week. Now, I have no idea. No one's come to me and said, this is what we're going to do. This is pure speculation that they could sit there and say, we're going to refresh the content, and we're basically going to, all of those people who came week 1, come back and see us week 3. We've got something new for you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that one, but I'm not a Swiftie, so I don't know about the surprise songs and all that stuff. So what will her concert tour dates be moving forward? I mean, she has no dates scheduled until October
of 24. So Miami in, Paul, when we're at Show East next year, we can make a side journey over to Hard Rock Stadium and go catch. We can go catch Taylor.
Well, let's do it. That'd be really. We'll have to film that, Mike. Mike and Paul go to see Taylor
Swift. There you go.
Oh, this is an aside, and I'm looking and I'm seeing she'll be in Buenos Aires on November 9th.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know. We can check it, but whether she's on tour or not at the time the movie's in theaters, that is kind of interesting. If it's true, we'll have to check. But yeah, no matter what, this is a phenomenon like no other. And again, you were right, Mike. This was announced and nobody knew it was coming.
No, it was
a gift.
We had heard that Team Swift was shopping something. I think they had engaged with a lot of different studios and talked about it. So it wasn't a complete surprise that the project was out there. And a lot of the Swift fans were speculating as they had seen cameras, at 3 of the SoFi Stadium shows. So there was speculation, but how the deal came together, no one had any clue that.
But look, she has other stuff that's on streaming. She and her team, Swift's team chose to go theatrical, and I think that says a lot. Look at the Barbenheimer phenomenon. Now we got the Swift phenomenon
and
that's on the way.
Here's the thing, Paul. Think about that for a second. I wouldn't be surprised if Barbie did not have some kind of influence on this decision, because traditionally, yes, the concert pieces have gone direct to a streamer. If you look at what Elton John did at Dodger Stadium last year, that went direct to a streamer. And her previous have gone direct to streaming. Somebody on Team Swift said, you know what? There's a chance that before we go, we should have a communal experience. And in her Instagram post, she actually pointed out that she wanted her fans to dance and to sing and to bring the friendship bracelets. So to emulate the concert experience at a theater.
In the theater.
And to me, that's a much bigger story than all of this, because you now have, arguably the number one musical act in the world saying that it's so important for my fans to be able to experience together that I'm going to go here first before I take a ridiculous amount of money to go to streaming.
Right. And who knows better than she, the power of the communal experience? Who knows better than Taylor Swift?
Well,
that's what she does.
It speaks volumes to what we've been talking about, Paul. And there's a reason why Barbie worked. There's a reason why Oppenheimer worked. There's a reason why Sound of Freedom worked. And again, these are all movies and content that was better experienced in a group together than it was sitting on your couch at home.
Do you think this changes the future of the concert film? In other words, we've seen kind of a shift towards the one-offs, the BTS, one night only, kind of the Coldplay, where you might have it 2 or 3 times. The event cinema model, which works very, very well. This is more of a traditional, sort of like this, not sort of, very much like Bieber, This Is It, Miley Cyrus, where they're or even going back to Madonna's Truth or Dare, U2's, I think it was Rattle and Hum. That was a Stop Making Sense, The Last Waltz.
The first one, by the way, the first one I ever saw at the UA North Hollywood was Wings Over America.
Over America. I have that on.
Let me just tell you, that was a 3-hour concert footage that was not very. I love McCartney, but that would have been better spent me seeing it on my couch.
They're bringing back a remastered version of Talking Heads. Stop Making Sense.
That's going to be. Huge,
I'm very excited for that.
Be huge.
Yeah, that's Jonathan Demme directing. I mean, maybe that's because of, who knows if the Taylor Swift announcement inspired that. I don't know.
Going to your question about, does it change, the event cinema? A little bit, but not a lot. Because going back to, my earlier point, this is not a concert movie. This is a cultural event. And there are very few artists that I'm thinking of right now that could pull something like this off, if any. As everybody who knows me knows, I am a huge Springsteen fan. I've seen him over 50 times. There's no shot in hell that Springsteen could pull something like this off. A Bruce show would be at a Fathom event one night only, because that's what the fan base would support. To be able to do something like this is just, think about that. If you're talking about $100 million of opening weekend, Paul, you're talking about, close to 10 million people coming out to the movies that opening weekend to see this.
And it's great too, Mike, because not everyone can afford a ticket to the concert itself, but a movie ticket is very affordable and will allow for that communal experience. It's the next best thing to actually being there, I suppose, for a lot of Swift fans who may be financially out of that.
Or she didn't stop in their city.
Exactly.
So, look.
So now she'll be in every city.
She will be in every city. Anyway, the one question I want to ask you now, and then we can kind of segue into the weekend, and that is, now that we've got, let's call it an extra couple of $100 million that are going to get added to the kitty, where do you think we're going to net out in 2023?
I still think for the domestic box, for the year, I think we wind up at just over $9 billion.
I think you're right.
Even with the extra Swift money, because the Dune money moved, it's like moving the money around a bit, right? I don't want to go too far out on a limb and say, because Swift moved in, now we get to 10 billion.
I would find it hard to believe.
To be cautious on
it's funny you say that, because I kind of agree with you. Like when everything moved, I kind of went from 10 kind of to 8.5, 8.75. And now I'm like, I think 9, maybe a little over, is probably very doable at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair number. And then if you look at the summer historical stats, if the summer wound up, by the way, at 4 point, I think when we spoke last, we didn't have the final figures yet. We were ahead of the end of the summer. So we wound up, just to recap, at 4.091 billion, according to our ComScore data, for the summer, for that 18-week
period. What was last year?
And last year was 3.434 billion.
Okay, so this leads into, I got an email from a friend of mine who is a industry heavyweight, so to speak, and he asked me today. He said, "Is it true if Barbie hadn't been there, we would have been below last summer?" And I said to him, because this is it's the typical kind of thing that you get. And I said to him, I go, yes, but at the same time, it's like going to last year and saying, if we didn't have Top Gun, where would we have been?
Yeah.
Every summer, we have one of these movies. In 2019, it was Avengers Endgame that we had.
That's right. Well, Mike, the fact that we wound up 91 million over the 4 billion shows how tenuous it is, because and we talked about this, when I kind of predicted and went out on a limb and said we'll hit 4 billion, we barely got to 4 billion, even with we wound up at 91 million over 4 billion. That's not a lot of money. And we got there on the Friday of Labor Day weekend when the equalizer put us over the top. So it just shows how, and you're right, Mike, when you say, well, if we didn't have this, that'd be like saying, well, if we didn't have gravity, we'd fly off into the outer space.
No, I think my point being,
still there,
being is, and it's easy to look at it that way, and that is, you want to take a look and say, wow, if we didn't have that one movie, it would not have been great. But every summer, we seem to have that movie. So, again, looking ahead to next year, what is that movie going to be? I have no idea.
And we don't know yet. And also, Mike, if Barbenheimer hadn't happened, I would say that both Barbie and Oppenheimer would not have made as much money. I think they helped each other build more box office. But, So it's a little, you always talk about, Mike, the movie gods. That right there is the movie gods. We just didn't know. Wait, let's talk about another one that wasn't even on the radar. Sound of Freedom added $180 million to the summer box office. So if you didn't have Sound of Freedom out there, we wouldn't have gotten the 4 billion.
What I guess I want to say to everyone is they're kind of like, well, this helped us here, that helped us there. If you go back and look at every summer, and I was talking to a reporter about this a couple of weeks ago who was doing a summer wrap, and that was, this is typical of every summer, and that is, there are the ones that we thought were going to be the home runs that end up being singles or doubles. There are the ones that we came out of nowhere. It just is the way the movie business works. Yeah. In general, I think, Paul, when you went out and said $4 billion, that was obviously a good number. You came out and doing your math, they're like, I don't know how exactly it's all going to shake out, but we're going to probably be in that range. Now that we're looking toward the end of the year, and again, the writer's strike not helping, or the writers and actors strike not necessarily helping us at this point, we're still looking at a $9 billion box office. And when you consider where we were, not just last year, but 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And you're talking about this business responding in this fashion. It's a big statement on where we are. And
it's amazing. It is a big statement, Mike. The other thing too is traditionally, like, I'll just go through a couple of years here. So in 2016, the summer represented 39% of the full year box office. 2018, the summer represented 37%. 2019, 38%. Guess what? This year it'll be like 45% because the summer was so strong, but yet we may see a bit of a slowdown here in the latter part of the year with some of the films moving out, all that stuff. But still pretty amazing.
Well,
if you go back to the summer of 2020, Mike, the summer of 2020 didn't even generate 200 million.
No, it was, if you remember too, and that was the summer of streaming, and theatrical was dead. There was no way it was ever going to come back. People were like, it's never even going to get close to $10 billion. I remember talking to a couple of analysts who were sitting there going, do you think we could do 7 billion again? And you're like looking at them going like, what are you guys looking at? Like, where do you come up with this stuff?
Well, Mike, that's just short-sightedness. They're just jumping on the idea. I think, again, we've talked about this many times on Ticket to Ride, the podcast. Everyone right now is talking about and listening to Taylor Swift. I hope you're listening because we're but yeah, that is something that was kind of written off, that just the movie industry was going to have its inevitable doom met much earlier due to the acceleration of the business dynamics created by the pandemic. And here we are, last year was $7.5 billion for the year. This year we'll probably be at 9 to 9.2 billion. That's a remarkable recovery. And I get people asking me, well, why aren't we back at 11 billion? That isn't the point.
Well, but I'm going to bring up one of the reasons we're not there. We're still lacking content. We're still lacking content, Paul. 2019, how many wide releases? You put that chart together on Friday. What was going into the weekend? What was in 2019? How many wide releases had we had?
Oh my gosh, we had like 100 we were 41 wide releases fewer in 20.
No. I'm talking about going into this weekend. I'm talking 23 versus 19.
Hold on.
Yeah. You put that chart together, and I'm sorry I threw Paul for a loop. I didn't tell him ahead of time I was going to do. I got on my soapbox. This was but it comes down to content again.
Well, heading into this weekend, it's great. I'm glad you brought this up, Mike. So we had 60,
right,
60. And then in 2019, at the same point, 76.
So we had 16, and it's actually 15 because I always count A Man Called Otto, which doesn't come up, I know, in the thing. So
I love you're Mr. Otto.
61 wide releases as far as I'm concerned.
All right,
but we're still 15 behind, Paul. We're 15 wide releases behind in that we were in 2019. if you have those releases, and
that's $1 billion.
I was going to say, like, again, so, you're right back where, again, if you do the math, it all comes out at the end of the day. And that is, if the content is there, guess what? We're right around 10, $11 billion. Now, we're going into a period this weekend. That's going to be my segue into what happened this weekend. Paul, we doubled the total box office from last year. This one came in at just over 85 million, I think. And what were we, like 42 and a half last year?
And last year, that was the weekend after Labor Day.
Barbarian was the top dog.
Big, wide releases. Yeah, so it shows you what a difference a year can make. And also that the studios went all in this year on providing summer movies all the way up to the last, including Equalizer 3, which did incredible business. Now we're getting low on time here, so let's recap the most current weekend where The Nun 2 topped the box office. But interestingly, Mike, the international box office for both Jawan, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, the Indian movie, and The Nun 2, they earned a lot more internationally than they did domestically, which is really impressive.
Well, and Nun 2 earned Jawan coming in. So Jawan ended up fourth domestically, 6.1 million, 813 theaters. Paul, they did $7,500 a screen for the weekend.
Their PTA, or per theater average, as we like to say, was huge for that movie. And it was the number 2 movie worldwide, because that movie, while it earned, what did you say for the weekend?
6.2, yeah.
I got it right here. 6.2 million, basically. It earned 56 million internationally.
That's unbelievable.
Over the weekend.
Unbelievable. And then, so The Nun came in right about where the pre-release projections had it, 32.6. I looked it up. Did you know that the Conjuring franchise has now grossed almost $800 million? That is unbelievable to me.
And that's 10 years from the first film, The Conjuring, which was a brilliant film, and over 2.1 billion in global box office revenue for that Conjuring franchise.
Now, and then this is
across 9 movies.
Another one. This one is just amazing to me, and hopefully they're quick at work on Equalizer 4. So Equalizer 3. $12 million for the weekend. They're at 61.8. Paul, do you know where they were on the last 2 movies after 2 weeks?
The exact same place.
This is the most consistent franchise I've ever seen.
Mike, you know why they call it the Equalizer? Because every gross, including opening day, opening weekend, and on the first 2, the final domestic and final global were like just a few million apart. I mean, I had to do a double take when I look. This is the very model of consistency. It's the Equalizer equalizes everything.
I have never seen a franchise so consistent through 3 episodes.
May I do my quick movie review of it? I saw it with my father-in-law, Mike. We went, had a boys' night out, went and saw the Equalizer 2. I felt extremely, vigorous and manly because I'm with my father-in-law and we go see the Equalizer 3. It was so good, Mike. The first one that movie kind of blew my mind. The intensity of it. It elevates because of Denzel Washington's star power. The fact that he really wasn't able to go out and promote the movie, he was able to by virtue of his name alone. And his acting just elevates this beyond. And he really, I don't know, Denzel, I'm tired, Mike, of people saying there are no more movie stars left.
Denzel Washington.
And Denzel Washington is it.
Well, this movie,
and he's a great actor.
This movie's on my list. I definitely need to see it. So thank you for the hearty recommendation.
It's 2 hours and 20 minutes or something. It doesn't feel like it goes by.
So
like that.
We also had another third in a franchise this weekend, and that was our good friend Paul Brooks, who was on the podcast a couple months ago. My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. $10 million this weekend, which is, a great win. And again, counter programming. I was speaking with Paul over the weekend. He was thrilled with how the movie was playing and how it was how well it was doing. So the franchise, it keeps on.
I think it's just great.
Do you know?
I love that Paul Brooks. Oh,
I was going to say, here's an interesting fact. I went back and looked at it on it. Like Oppenheimer, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the first movie, did whatever it was, $263 million. Do you realize it? 241.3. It was never number one at the box office. It never held the top spot. It got as high as number 2, and that was well into its release. I mean, talk about consistency.
Sometimes you don't have to be number 1 to be a winner. Right?
That's what it comes down to.
Well, you know what? Also, I have more Greek Wedding, My Big Fat Greek Wedding trivia. That movie played in theaters for 51 weeks straight.
That is, that's got to be close to a record. Although I will say on a smaller scale, when I was back at Artisan, we had a documentary called The Buena Vista Social Club, if you remember that, about the Cuban jazz musicians. It played at Lincoln Square, which is not the Sony Lincoln Square, but Lincoln Center, I should say. It played there about 60 weeks. After 45 weeks, this was pre-digital, they called and said, "Can we get another print? This one's just kind of like done."
It's worn out. like I have some vinyl records like that, Mike. Remember back we used to play the shit out of our
it's like, a little scratchy. It's not going to
another one.
Real quick, as we wrap this up too, is number 5 this week was Barbie, 5.7 million. It was off 44%, $620.27 million. Number 13 all time on the box office list, and it's going to
Unbelievable.
It's going to be number 12 by the time we're going to next week.
It's at 1.4 billion globally.
That is Barbie. Just unbelievable, and it is a big win for our friends over at Warner's. It was their 6th movie this year to open up to number 1. So,
and it's the number 1 film in Warner Brothers illustrious.
It is, and it'll be interesting to see what happens too, Paul, because tomorrow it lands on PVOD.
Which one, Barbie or Robbie?
Barbie does. Barbie lands on PVOD. Here's what I'm going to predict. You're going to see it like down 12%, over the weekend. It's going to have one of those massive holds because so far, every time we see a movie go into PVOD, it has very little, if any, effect on the box office.
Part of that too, don't you think part of that too, though, is price?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
because PVOD it can be pretty expensive, and you don't own it, right?
Well, it depends. You can rent. I think Barbie is $24.99 to rent, $29.99 to own. But there's a halo effect that happens on these things, and where you see the issue is when those movies end up going on streaming, which is, perceived as free to those who have those streaming services. The barrier to watch is much lower. However, that being said, Barbie's not done anytime soon from a theatrical standpoint. And, we, if you remember, Paul, predicted this on opening weekend that there was a lot of runway on this movie. There was nothing really targeting the female audience until this past weekend with Greek Wedding. And Greek Wedding did 10. They still did 5.7. So, Barbie's on a roll.
Absolutely. And so are we, Mike, because can we do an update on our Ticket to Ride Live?
Yes.
That'll be at Showies this year. We will be performing live on Tuesday, October 24 at about 8:30 in the morning.
Paul loves the early morning. The one thing he always says, "Can we please not do these early morning?" And every year it's we got you guys at 8:30.
Every year. Yeah, 8:30. Thanks. No, but it's okay. I'll rally, Mike. There's a thing called coffee, but can we either say who the guest is?
I think we can. We can.
We have two. Well, we have one absolutely confirmed.
Guest. I think we're going to have 2 confirmed guests that are going to be appearing with us on the panel.
Well, 2, but I'm still waiting for the final approval. But Brock Bagley,
Brock, who is
that's a statement,
is the
not a
EVP
question.
and head of content programming for B&B Theaters, is going to join us and talk about how the marketplace is affecting more on the regional side and what he sees in the marketplace. Brock, very active in NATO. So it'll be interesting to get their perspective on where we're going.
Yep. And Brock is a great friend and friend of the industry and just a wonderful guy. And I think he'll add a lot to our Ticket to Ride Live at Show East this year. We're going to have other guests. I think we're going to have studio representation. We're going to have journalistic representation on our panel.
Yeah.
We're going to.
I was going to say the whole idea is we really want to get different perspectives on where the industry is. Paul and I sit here and we, talk about, from where we stand, how it all looks. But it'll be really interesting to get the perspective of a journalist who's covering this industry, somebody who is operating an exhibitor in this industry, and also someone who's from a studio side who will be able to give us a little more information. When we do that too, Paul, we're going to have 2 weeks of Taylor Swift information that I'm sure will be a heavy topic for the panel.
I think that'll be a great one. And then maybe we can bring in another guest who could speak to that. I'm not saying it's Taylor Swift. I'm saying a guest who could talk about how that movie played in their theater.
Well, I mean, Brock will probably have a really good, line on that. But I think it'll be interesting to hear all about how all that, kind of came together.
And you're right. I think Brock will be the perfect guest for the Taylor Swift, but maybe we get a Taylor Swift fan to come up and
that would be the
you're listening now.
Well, and the good news is we're going to be recording everything live. So for anyone who can't make it to the seminar, we're going to then post that as the podcast for that week.
And again, that's Show East this year on October 24th, which is Tuesday morning. We hope to see you there live and in person for that Ticket to Ride Live. Otherwise, you will be hearing from Mike and I about 2 weeks from now, because we're doing this every couple of weeks. But I'm Paul DeGarabedian, Senior Media Analyst for ComScore, and Mike Polidorus, my esteemed co-host.
And a big shout out,
Paper Airplane Media.
Again, a big shout out to Thaddeus and all the people over at Screendollars for helping produce the podcast and making sure that it shows up on your playlist.
We really do appreciate it. Thaddeus and team, that's really at Screendollars. Thank you so much, because without you guys, it would just be Mike and I talking and recording this for ourselves. So now everybody gets to hear it. All right, Mike. Well, thanks again. Have a swift week, and I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
She's got a ticket to ride, but she don't care.